back to Chuducation. I'm Chloe Chu, and I'm here with two special guests.
Hello, I'm Sarah In.
And I'm Ziz Chang.
All right, welcome everybody. On today's episode, we are going to discuss if the federal government should establish laws regarding schools or if the state/local government should. Now here's Sarah with her side of the argument.
So I strongly believe that education laws need to be controlled by the federal government. Why, you may ask? Well, let's take a look at the Brown versus Board of Education ruling that occurred in 1954. This case proved that the federal government has the power to intervene in cases of legally sanctioned discrimination. Some of these examples are 1. Segregation of public schools across the country. 2. Unequal access to education to kids with disabilities. 3. Inequality in access to resources across varying states and districts with differing income levels. So this means that if the federal government has the ability by law to intervene in these scenarios, they should have the power to establish laws in schools.
Although I see your point in giving the federal government power to decide what is right for our schools regarding disabled children or families with varying socioeconomic standings, you missed out on a very important piece of the puzzle. One of the most crucial players in the education of our youth is parents, and parents like to get very involved in school board decision-making. If the federal government were to issue bills that apply to all schools, we are removing the need for any parent involvement other than voting for representatives that will make us lose a large portion of resources we currently have. For example, in 1991, Massachusetts passed a reform bill on standards, accountability, and choice, and in 1993 became the nation's top academic achiever. This was primarily pushed out by local districts and school boards, which shows that these groups make the best decisions for their own circumstances. Ultimately, it is the parents and local authorities that know better than the federal government what is good for their youth, and thus only with tailored education systems.
Well, I would like to disagree on his point. I think that actually it is
Whoa. Okay. Here's another question to cool things down. Now, Sarah, you mentioned the Brown versus Board of Education case in 1954, but here's a more recent issue. Laws regarding school safety. There has been over 20 cases of school shootings this year, and it is a heavy problem that is affecting the United States. So this leads into my question. Who is responsible to decide on the issue of school safety? Is it the national federal government or the state government? But before we hear responses from our guests, let's take a short music break. Here's the school safety song by Daniel.
Let's make school safer, everyone's in on it, even the president. Schools are where the leaders of tomorrow grow, so let's help them feel safe to do so. Making schools safe, yeah, we can do it with a little help from everyone. Make schools a safe place to be, where students can all learn and have fun. We can do it.
And we're back. That was a wonderful song. Now let's bring it back to Sarah, where she was about to answer the question of who is responsible for school safety. So Sarah, what is your opinion on this issue?
So, this past March, President Trump anointed the U.S. Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, to be the head of the Federal Commission on School Safety, in partnership with Attorney General Jeff Sessions, Secretary of Health and Human Services Alex Azar, and Secretary of Homeland Security Kirstjen Nielsen, and experts on the subjects. This group will move throughout the nation and participate in first-hand observations and learn the nation's best practices in school safety. This group consists of the most qualified individuals in the nation with the greatest amount of access to school safety practices and research with funding from the federal government. Thus, it is only fitting that the federal government is the one that appoints school safety laws and regulations.
Once again, Sarah, It should be the jobs of local authorities to address issues regarding school safety because different regions have different reasons for school violence. For example, in Town A, bullying and harassment might be very prominent within their high school. In that school, policies should be passed to stop bullying and ease tensions between individual students. But in Town B, religions or cultures might have negative collisions with each other, causing tensions between different bodies of students. This cannot be resolved through anti-bullying policies, but should be resolved through school-sanctioned cultural events or information sessions instead. The federal government should not come into our schools and just determine one policy that will work for everyone. It should be determined locally. However, the federal government should implement policies that allow schools and districts to do this individually under a certain infrastructure so schools receive funding to do what they need to do.
Wow, thank you, Ziz and Sarah, for sharing your sides of the argument and joining me today on Chuducation. Well, that is all for today. We will have another podcast next week. But one last thing, since we know their sides, my question to you is, what is your opinion on this particular issue?